Hello, future designers and developers, and welcome back to our last video tutorial on creating this focus timer over here that is slowly counting down. And what we're going to do inside of this timer is we are going to be able to select what value we want, hit play or pause so that we can start counting down from a set time. We've already been working on this, and so far all that we have is some real basic HTML, and we can set our remaining time to 5 minutes, 15, or 25 minutes, but our timer doesn't actually work. In this video, I'm just going to be going over how to make this timer run, but we are not going to be doing any of the CSS. I'm going to leave the CSS up to you. Cool. So the two functions that we created already is one to set the time based on which button we click, and then a function over here, update timer, to actually update that timer. And that is taking whatever our total time in seconds is, and then changing it into a string and displaying it inside of a div that we created that is called live timer in our JavaScript. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we are going to have an event listener attached to this button over here that is going to make this active or not active. And when it's active, we're going to have this play symbol inside of it. When it's not active, we are going to have a pause symbol inside of it. So let's do that, and then the last thing that we're going to do is actually make the timer function itself. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to call out this button and actually make it clickable, add an event listener to it. So let's go over to const, and we are going to create, what did I call this? Inside of my HTML, this has a button is play pause. So we're gonna const, we're gonna call this, I think play pause is appropriate. I probably should have saved that for this. Makes a little more sense over here. We're gonna call it play pause is equal to document, and I'm going to use the query selector just because it's so simple. Query selector, and this one is again that class that is dot play pause. I'm reusing names, probably should be unique, but it's okay. So now we've got our const play pause, document query selector is play pause. Sweet. Now we want to take that button that we have just selected and add an event listener to it. So let's do play pause dot add event listener. And we are looking for a click, and when it clicks, we are going to run a function that is just going to be called active. So that active function is going to change our play pause icon inside of that, but it also is going to give this button a class of active, which is going to be important because when this button has a class of active, we are going to be running a timer. When it's not have a class of active, we're going to be pausing the timer. So let's actually create this function right now. This function is just to give this button the class of active and to change our play symbol from a pause symbol. So let's call this active. It's not going to be taking any arguments, and we are just going to start with toggling that button. So we've got that button that is called play pause, and we're going to take its class list, and we are going to toggle a class that we are going to call active. Now there's no active class inside of my CSS. It doesn't really matter. If you wanted to add in like different colors, like if you wanted to make play green and pause red, this would be an awesome opportunity to actually throw that into your CSS, but we're not gonna do that today. We're just focused on the JavaScript and all that. Cool. So now we just have this toggling of active, and let's just go over here and we're gonna console.log hello just to see if this is working. Let's clear our console. So now, yep, when I click on this button, it says hello. So I'm assuming that it's getting the class of active and not active. We could check that with the CSS or by console logging out the classes that are attached to it, but I don't feel like that is necessary. So now we are going to create an if statement, and this if statement is largely going to be on whether or not the active class is applied and then what is changing inside of that. So we're going to say if our play pause button dot class list, and this one is just going to be if it contains the class active, because we're not exactly it's not going to be applied first to this button. It's also using an ion icon, which can be a little bit tricky. So it depends on which icon you're using, but they actually use classes, or they don't use classes, so they don't have an existing class list. So we're just going to make sure that we're using contains. So if it contains, this is just a single argument active, we're going to be doing something. So yeah, that looks good. So if the play pause class list contains active, we are going to have a actual pause button inside of it, because we have just pressed this button. It is now active, so we want to have a pause button available. So let's go over here and let's grab a pause button. So we're going to go back over to icons. We're going to go from play. We're going to find our pause. We're going to stick with the same style. So we're going to grab the circle. And I am going to go over to this over here. I'm going to hit paste inside of this. The reason why we have this right here is we're going to make this the inner HTML of play pause. So we're going to say play pause dot inner HTML is equal to, and we're going to throw this all inside of backticks. And one thing, since we're right here and we're adding in this button, we want to actually make sure that any class that we're going to be using inside of our CSS is actually here. So I'm going to say class is equal to icon button. And that's going to be helpful when you start to style this with our CSS. It's not going to be helpful right now, but because we're changing this, we want to make sure that our classes are visible inside of here. So, cool. So we're going to say if play pause is equal to active, then we've got this pause button inside of here. Then we're going to do an else statement, and if not, we're going to take this play pause. We're going to copy this, but instead of it being the pause circle outline, we want this to be the play circle outline. So we're going to go back over here, and we're going to change this to play circle outline. Cool. All right, let's see if that worked. One, we can set all these, go over here. Now you can see it switches between pause, play, pause, play, pause, play, pause, play, pause, play. Perfect. That's all we did. Now we are going to create another function. We could have done this all inside of one function, but I think it's just cleaner and easier to debug and troubleshoot if we do this as two functions. So we've got this function over here active, and now we're going to have this actual function that is going to be our running of the timer. So we're going to call function run timer. And this one, again, is not going to take any arguments, so we can close that up right here. And this one is just going to say if our button has a class of active and our total time is greater than or equal to 0 seconds, we're going to be updating the timer and taking down a second. So what we're going to do, we'll create that if statement. So if our play pause has a class list that contains active, I am all over the place typing today. All right, so if it contains active, or and we want it to be active and our total time in seconds is greater than or equal to 0, we want the following to happen. Because we don't want this clock to continue after we reach 0 and it keeps on counting down over and over and over again. So we're going to say if play pause class list contains active and total time is greater than 0, what we're going to do, we are going to update timer or time, because we're calling this function again. And then we are going to take our total time in seconds and we're going to decrement it. So we're going to minus minus. So every single time, if this class is active, we've got play pause with the class of active, we're going to update the time and we're going to take a time off. We're going to take a second off. Now we want to call this function right here, function run timer. We want to call this every second. So what we're going to do outside of the function, now that this function is complete, and I want this to be on one line. Cool. Now that that function is complete, we're going to call this function every single second. So we're going to do set interval, and on the set interval, we want to run timer, and we want to run timer every 1,000 seconds, or 1,000 milliseconds, or 1 second in total. So that should be it. So let's try this. We're going to select 5, we're going to hit play, and then, yeah, it's now updating. I'm not going to wait for the 5 minutes to show that it goes down to 0. You can do that if you want, and it should stop at 0. That's what this is going to do. This line right here, the total time in seconds. But we also can pause it, and you can see, and now my play button is back, my time has stopped. I can hit this again, and it's going to go through. Sweet, that is our timer. It took us probably in total a little over 30 minutes. But yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, please make sure that you're reaching out. I'll talk to you later. Bye.